Another hurricane is headed in the direction of the U.S. state of Florida just weeks after Hurricane Helene brought floods, the likes of which have not been seen for years. Hurricane Milton, characterized as a Category 4, is due to make landfall on Wednesday. Already, winds of up to 155 miles per hour have been recorded off the coast of Mexico as it hurls towards Florida. The National Hurricane Center has described Milton as an extremely powerful storm, which poses an extremely serious threat to Florida. U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to lay out preparations for Milton. The White House says he has postponed his trips to Germany and Angola to oversee the preparations and the response. There's no word on when the trips have been rescheduled. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the state is only 48 hours from Milton's landfall and that people should finalize and execute evacuation plans to protect their homes and families. Roads, however, remain busy with 150% more traffic than normal. 51 Florida counties are now under a state of emergency as winds are forecast to reach sustained speeds of 150 miles per hour with storm surges of between 5 feet and 10 feet. And as we said earlier, Hurricane Milton is a Category 4 storm. Let's look at the satellite images there of its progression as it heads towards Florida. We see Milton churning across the Gulf of Mexico. This was on Monday. Today, however, it's on its way to Florida, where more than 1 million people have been ordered to evacuate from its path. The densely populated west coast of Florida still reeling from the devastating Hurricane Helene less than 2 weeks ago is bracing for landfall on Wednesday. Milton is expected to pound the northern edge of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula in the early hours of today. More on Hurricane Milton. Officials are warning that the rapidly approaching hurricane presents a multi-hazard event that will bring storm surges, flooding, and power outages. They're urging residents to follow evacuation orders. The National Hurricane Center Deputy Director, Jamie Rome, said on Monday during a press briefing that Hurricane Milton will bring maximum speeds of up to 145 miles per hour when it is expected to impact on Wednesday, and a storm surge as high as 15 feet, that's approximately 4.6 meters. Milton strengthened to a Category 5 storm on Monday, posing an immediate threat to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula on its way to Florida, where the state has ordered evacuations.
Let's look at the current statistics. Maximum wind speeds of 180 miles per hour. Pressure down to 905 millibars, movement to the east at 10. And the question everybody wants to know is where will Milton go and what sort of impacts it will bring. Generally going to continue moving to the east overnight tonight and then gradually turn towards the northeast on Tuesday and approach the Florida Peninsula on Wednesday. Here you can see just offshore the Florida Peninsula, 1 p.m. Wednesday with max winds of 145 miles per hour. The yellow area here is a tropical storm watch, means tropical storm conditions are possible. And look, they extend all the way down now into southeastern Florida, including Miami-Dade and Broward County. The red area here is a hurricane warning. So the warning is different from the watch because it is saying conditions are expected. But the take-home message is if you're in this red area, you need to be in action mode. You need to be taking action to protect your house, to protect your family. Now, it's not just going to be a wind threat. Let's look at the storm surge threat, too. I think most people know now the Florida West Coast is incredibly susceptible to storm surge, and that's why there is a storm surge warning now in effect from basically Flamingo down here in Everglades National Park all the way up to just north of Cedar Key. Somewhere in this purple area, not everywhere, somewhere in this purple area, we are predicting 10 to 15 feet of storm surge. Put that in perspective, I'm 6 feet tall. That's more than 2 of me high. And if this is realized, that is more surge than was experienced during Helene. So to sort of put that in perspective. So basically, all hazards are in play here. A multi-hazard event, you really have to be thinking about significant widespread power outages for days where the Milton crosses the Florida Peninsula. significant downed trees, significant power outages, maybe the inability to move around for several days. I want to urge everyone, if you've been ordered to evacuate, those evacuations orders are serious and you absolutely must follow them.
Well, evacuation orders are in place in Florida. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has made a decision to travel to Florida despite this impending storm. In the meantime, the Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has spoken about Hurricane Milton and asked residents in Florida to heed evacuation warnings. She was speaking at a joint base at Joint Base Andrews. She said former President Donald Trump is pushing misinformation out on resources available to survivors of Hurricane Helene, calling it extraordinarily irresponsible. She also said that playing political games is utterly irresponsible when asked about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis not taking her calls ahead of Hurricane Milton.
Off the phone with Administrator Criswell at FEMA. And I cannot stress enough to all the folks in Florida, in the Tampa area, please listen to evacuation orders. Please listen to your local officials, because I know a lot of folks out there have survived these hurricanes before. This one is going to be very, very serious. And I urge you to please just grab whatever you need. Listen to the orders you're getting from your local officials. They know what they're telling you, and they know what Milton is about to be. So please do that. The other point I'd make is that there's a lot of mis and disinformation being pushed out there by the former president about what is available, in particular to the survivors of Helene. And first of all, it's extraordinarily irresponsible. It's about him. It's not about you. And the reality is that FEMA has so many resources that are available to folks who desperately need them now, and resources that are about helping people get back on their feet and rebuild and have places to go. You are entitled to these resources. People are entitled to these resources, and it is critically important that people apply for the help that is there to support. That all of those resources were created for just these kinds of moments in an emergency situation, knowing that folks are entitled to have the relief that they so rightly need at this moment in time. So listen to your sheriffs around the places that have been impacted by Helene. Listen to your local sheriff, who's going to tell you straight about what's available to you and how, for so many reasons and ways, there are no conditions attached to the relief that's available to you.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, how does Milton differ from Hurricane Helene?
Hurricane Milton is much larger in size, and what we've seen, and as you all heard earlier, when you think about the gust of wind, the size of the actual of the waves that will be coming in and the storm surge that will be coming in, is looking at a Category 5, and Helene was in some areas 3 or 4. So this is one of the strongest hurricanes we've seen in recent history. And as we've stated before, and as you know, having a second hurricane right behind Hurricane Helene is definitely going to be extremely devastating to the area. And these types of hurricanes at this level are not just talking about destroying homes. These are things that could be putting people's lives in danger. And you heard the Vice President mention the real need to evacuate because this is really about a life-saving effort at this time because of what is believed to be hitting that part of Florida, specifically the Tampa area, which is highly populated with individuals.
Yes, and it will also be difficult for rescue operations to be carried out during Hurricane Milton, right, because of the conditions that present those very strong winds. So people really do need to heed those evacuation orders. But Florida really going through it now, as you rightly mentioned, Hurricane Helene, still the impacts of which people are still reeling from. Talk to us about preparations, however, on the ground by the federal government to ensure that people are on their way out to safer grounds in Florida. as well as what sort of help is available to them?
So yes, typically these type of events, the governor of that state, so Governor DeSantis would have his team and those who are part of the emergency response system in Florida going out to communities, advising individuals as to the need to evacuate, providing shelter situations, working collectively with bordering states or even parts of Florida that might not be at the same risk as that Tampa area as to try to get people to evacuate there. So there's a lot of emergency response on the ground that is being set up by the state of Florida. Now, FEMA is already on the ground, which is a federal emergency management administration. They're already on the ground working for the restoration and kind of the recovery efforts as it relates to Helene. And so obviously they will also be helping with preparation, obviously ensuring water, some of their safety and survival needs are going to also be key and important, but it's really going to make sure that the vulnerable communities are being addressed, which is thinking about hospitals as well, the hospital communities, ensuring that they are prepared with whatever they need for those who are in the hospital at the time or transporting individuals to other locations that are outside of the area of the storm. So those are going to be some of the key preparatory forces and areas that they're going to be looking into, and then making sure that people are only on the streets as they're looking to evacuate, and making sure that the roads are prepared, because you can also have sometimes unfortunate backups on major highways when a lot of people are trying to evacuate at one time, which is why they've been talking about evacuation over the last day or so to try to avoid any last minute rush that could encounter large traffic jams.
Yeah, and the window for evacuations is gradually closing in. Let's talk about those who decided to remain, to hunker down during Hurricane Helene. You think people will make the same mistake again with Milton?
Unfortunately, Florida is prone for hurricanes. And so oftentimes people that are in those regions are used to hurricanes. And so they do want to stay in their homes. They have, concern about their home, not really they're thinking more emotionally about the home being lost versus sometimes their safety. And so you are going to still see individuals that are going to believe and that they are going to stay in their homes. Obviously, we do know that some people survive through these storms, and he will survive through these storms. It's just about, you just don't know when you're talking about these Category 5 storms. And also, every hurricane is different and presents itself differently, and which is why evacuation is so key and critical.
Now, former President Donald Trump said, he's been saying that funds for Hurricane Helene have been diverted to immigrants, even though the Biden administration has debunked this. Again, we heard the vice president also debunking those allegations. How are they ensuring, however, that such misinformation does not spread regarding FEMA's efforts with Milton?
Agreed. Yes. And so that's kind of where the focal point is when you hear the vice president speak, when you hear the president speak. One of the things that we all know is that Florida has a larger concentration of migrants than some other parts of the country. And so it's very likely and very probable that individuals that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene are recent immigrants to the United States. The illegal alien component or the illegal immigration component is something that I think is outside of the lane of where the President Biden right now is focusing in on. But obviously they're ensuring that all of those residents and all those living in Florida are safe and secure despite their residency status, as some of them could be in the process of getting their formal statuses as U.S. residents. Some could be here on asylum. Some could be here in a variety of ways as to their residency in Florida. So that is, I think, something that the Biden administration is trying to really be clear on and addressing, that they are really focusing in on those who have been impacted and specifically those who are currently residing in Florida.
Thanks again, Maria. And we do hope the people in Florida do stay safe. Thanks again. We're off on another break now on The World Today. Still ahead. Bright red and green lights illuminating the skies over Lapland in northern Finland. We'll tell you all about it. Stay with us. The main suspect in the disappearance of 3-year-old British girl Madeleine McCann has been cleared by a German court of rape and sexual abuse in an unrelated trial. 47-year-old Christian Bruckner was acquitted of carrying out 5 offences in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. He's already serving a 7-year jail term in Germany for rape. Bruckner has not been charged in the case of Madeleine McCann, who disappeared in Portugal in 2007 and has never been found. Bruckner's defense team had argued he should be cleared because of a lack of evidence, although prosecutors had called for the court in Braunschweig in northern Germany to impose an additional 15-year jail term. Albanian police have fired tear gas to disperse opposition protesters who hurled petrol bombs at government buildings and smashed city property in Tirana on Monday as they protested the government of Prime Minister Edi Rama. Protesters were demanding Rama step down and caretaker government be installed until next year's general election, accusing the government of corruption, nepotism, and trying to silence the opposition. More than 1,000 police officers were deployed across Tirana as thousands of opposition supporters walked through the streets, throwing petrol bombs and stones. Some attacked advertising screens and billboards and set rubbish containers on fire. Police said 10 officers had received injuries from petrol bombs and other thrown objects. As well as calling for Rama's resignation, protesters were also demonstrating against the house arrest of opposition Democratic leader Sali Berisha on corruption charges for action he took while being Prime Minister. Berisha has denied any wrongdoing. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has sent a birthday message to Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling him his closest comrade. Mr. Kim, congratulating Putin on his 72nd birthday, added that relations between both countries would be raised to a new level. Relations between Pyongyang and Moscow have deepened since the start of the Ukraine war, in a move that has worried the West. Meanwhile, the North Korean leader says his country will speed up steps towards becoming a military superpower with nuclear weapons and would not rule out using them if enemies attacked it, according to state media. We're looking at still photographs released by the KCNA showing Mr. Kim making a visit to Kim Jong-il University of National Defense and taking group photos with students and officials. Mr. Kim, during a speech on Monday at the university, said he has no intention of attacking South Korea, but, in his words, if the enemy attempts to use force against our country, North Korea's military will use all aggression without hesitation, which does not preclude the use of nuclear weapons. In an election criticized by rights groups, Tunisia's President Kais Saied has won a second term with more than 90% of the votes counted. Only 2 candidates out of more than a dozen other hopefuls were allowed to stand in this election against President Saied on Sunday, where only 29% of more than 9 million people registered to take part. Saied's closest challenger, businessman Ayachi Zamel, won 7% of the vote, despite being sentenced to 12 years in prison for falsifying documents just 5 days before the poll. There were no campaign rallies or public debates. Nearly all the campaign posters in the streets were backing the president. Out of a global health industry worth $12 trillion, Nigeria controls only $6 billion, as far as being a leading exporter of health professionals. That's according to statistics from the Nigeria Medical Association, which convened a healthcare expo in Lagos to address sustainability of services in the private sector with a view to reversing medical tourism. Our correspondent, Mary Alale Yusuf, reports.
This hall is filled with physicians who have come to deliberate on ways to reduce medical tourism and enhance the quality of care in the country. The president of the Nigeria Medical Association gives a snapshot of the problem in his opening speech.
The global market for medical tourism exceeds $100 billion. However, Nigeria only contributes to this as an exporter of patients with an annual flight of capital of over $2 billion to medical tourism. This is predicted to get worse unless we intervene as a nation. We have so much maybe.
For some time, experts have agreed that private-public partnership is the way to go for sustainable quality healthcare. The question is the terms of the relationship. The CMD of the University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital speaks for the public sector.
It's not all PPPs may be in form of medical equipment or medical services, no. The infrastructural support is far more important than the equipment.
The Lagos State Commissioner for Health believes that the state has a winning model for drawing investment to the sector.
So what we're trying to do in Lagos is to restore healthcare back into the mainstream economy and activate what is described by economists as the invisible hand of the free market. This will automatically make the healthcare attractive to investors, reverse brain drain, accelerate brain gain, and neutralize outbound tourism.
The NMA points out that there is a lot of talent in the country which Nigerians are not aware of.
It's important we reverse medical tourism, and it has to be driven by the Nigerian Medical Association so that we can give opportunity for people to know what are the healthcare indices, healthcare healthcare services available for us in Nigeria. They are cost effective. There's little dollar flight because what you pay for those services abroad are very, very much. For example, to get a kidney transplant done in America, you take about 2.5 years.
The NMA is optimistic that Nigeria's healthcare system can be vibrant, reversing medical tourism and attracting patients from other countries. If the government creates a protected healthcare space which can attract private investment. Mary Alale Yusuf, Channels Television News.
U.S. scientists John Hopfield, and British-Canadian Geoffrey Hinton have won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics for discoveries and inventions that laid the foundation for machine learning. Hinton has been widely credited as the godfather of artificial intelligence and made headlines when he quit his job at Google last year to be able to more easily speak about the dangers of the technology he had pioneered. 91-year-old Hopfield, a professor emeritus at Princeton University, created an associative memory that can store and reconstruct images and other types of patterns in data.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics to John Hopfield, Princeton University, USA, and Geoffrey Hinton, University of Toronto, Canada, for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks.
As we end the program, bright red and green northern lights were seen in the skies over Lapland in northern Finland on Monday. The auroras seen over the skies of Sodankyle north of the Arctic Circle were captured by a local photographer who described it as the most vibrant red aurora display he'd ever seen. According to the photographer, the aurora borealis was active all night from dusk till dawn, dancing and exploding. Around midnight local time, the blood-red aurora appeared on the horizon, clearly visible to the naked eye. Auroras occur when charged particles from the sun collide with oxygen and nitrogen molecules in Earth's upper atmosphere. Aurora activity has been strongly recently due to high solar activity. According to NASA, the sun emitted a strong solar flare on October 7. It's just amazing, right? Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.